United we're as strong as a mountain.
This is Steve Zeltzer with WorkWeek, and this week we're going to look at the attack on Harvard Graduate Workers Union and the attack on not only the Harvard students, international students particularly, but graduate students around the country, and the effort of the Trump administration to basically try to take over higher education in their plan that they're taking forward in universities around the country. And joining us is Sara Speller. She's with the Harvard Graduate Students Union, UAW Local 5118. She's the president. The other unions at Harvard have come under intense attack. So welcome to our show, Sara.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
So, Sara, why don't you first talk about who you are and the kind of attacks that you've been facing recently with the threat against your members who are from other countries and also the union as a whole?
Yeah. My name is Sara Speller. Like you said, I am a graduate student in the music department at Harvard. So I do music history, philosophy, and theory. I actually am studying a lot about the way that people use the internet and different types of media to, let's say, cope with late stage capitalism, and how and whether that can be kind of considered a form of resistance under the kind of everyday peasant resistance that people like Scott from Yale discuss over the past few decades. So I'm very, very passionate about the kind of work that our union does, that working class efforts of resistance look like. So 5118 is currently in bargaining with the university. So that's a whole extra layer of things on top of it all. But we represent, I believe, 5,600 graduate students working in research labs, teaching, doing instructional work, and doing other research assistantships around the university. We are standing with all of the other unions at Harvard, including the Harvard Academic Workers, which is a UAW union attached to postdoctorates and non-tenure track positions, the Harvard Undergraduate Workers Union, HUWU, which is for the undergraduates, undergraduate workers in libraries, cafes, and student, I guess you could say, you used to be able to say, diversity, equity, inclusion, and offices like that. I think Harvard has renamed it to like student campus or campus life or something along those lines. But and this is not to mention all of the other really important and wonderful unions that we've been collaborating with, including 32JB or 32BJ, apologies, Local 26, the Harvard University clerical and technical workers. I always try to make sure I get that in the right order. And so many more folks. We've been under attack. I don't think that's super surprising. It's been a difficult semester. A lot of the attacks have been unfairly and unjustly pointing at our international students, our students who are utilizing within their constitutional right the ability to protest and freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. And it doesn't feel, to be completely honest, I personally, as Sara, not necessarily as the president of the union, but I personally think this is a pretty sustained project that has been happening over the last few decades to really cut into the value of academic institutions. These abilities that are being undercut to speak freely and research the things that we would like to. There's been a lot of attacks on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. These are, our most important constitutional rights that are genuinely under attack and have been for a long time. So between funding cuts, attacks on international and non-citizen students, and more, it's been heartening to see the folks that make up our unions come together and push back against the Trump administration.
And what percentage of your membership are international students who now are threatened with being deported or leaving the country and not being able to get in, or graduate students who want to come to Harvard?
Oh, I think a huge amount, right? Like, I think the last time we checked, it might have been, don't quote me on this exactly, but I think like 3,600 out of that 5,600. Um, that feels maybe slightly exaggerated. Hold on. I'm gonna see if I can't find out while we're talking. But needless to say, an immensely large amount of our friends, colleagues, of ourselves. We've got organizers at every level who are international students and non-citizens. Um, and I think, yeah, it's terrifying for them. And a lot of them have families. I am a resident. I'm an American citizen. So this is something that like I've only been able to watch, and it's a huge amount of our union that is affected by this, either directly or through family members of their own. Um, yeah.
And of course, the struggle of graduate students has been a long struggle, and you've been organizing for many, many years. The Trump and the people that support him with Project 2025 actually say they're against the right of graduate student unions. They don't believe you should have a union. Is that the case? And do you think that that's part of this attack on the graduate students?
I absolutely do think that is part of the attack. And okay, I just looked it up. It is actually 3,800 international workers is our most recent estimate for our local at least. So yeah, it's a considerable amount. I would say so. I'm a first generation college student, and I am and continue and was and continue to be low income. I think there's a very deep misunderstanding about what graduate students look like in this day and age and have looked like for a long time. Um, I'm in graduate school because it is my job. It is something that I care deeply about. And just like, like I care deeply about music, I care deeply about thinking um, about how people talk about music and how people experience music and what I think I can find and see in our cultural world and how it explains so many things about the way that we look at the economy, the way that we are primed to believe um, various versions of narratives about our lives and about capital, all of these things. Um, but in the same way that, you are, I would assume, love your job uh, and therefore want to put all of your efforts and energies into it and have applied to things that would further your career in that. That's what graduate students are doing as well. It's no longer just like a 25-year-old white man with no children and a tremendous safety net, just kind of spending a handful of years until they can be a professor. Like a lot of us have families, a lot of us are fully dependent on the ability to teach and do research as our income. And it's obviously, I mean, at the end of the day, I think American history has kind of proven that elites are not fans of organized laborers in general. So of course, there would be an opposition to graduate student workers organizing. Um, our current president, Alan Garber, when he was provost, made a website while the union was hoping to get formed and recognized that is literally called, I think, HGSU Critical. It's a WordPress, it's still up. So it's not just the Trump administration. I think these, bosses don't like unions. And I think the ability to kind of pin this, oh, these people are just doing this as an in-between until they get their real big fancy jobs, or all of these people are rich, or all of these people don't need to be unionized is baloney. Let's say baloney. Um, yeah, I don't know if that exactly answered your question, but I mean, I do think that this is part of a long effort of devaluing um, critical thinking, and which is what I kind of view academia as, being in its best senses at its best times. It's a way that people learn how to think critically and question the world and the influences around them. And so, if we are working under hostile environments, unable to unionize, as we teach people who are paying the institution good money, or maybe are there for free, but often, scholarships for colleges tend to be around need blindness, or need rather than, and to some degree, definitely merit. But like, these people are in college because they want to learn to think critically. So if we're not able to do that, and it's rapidly becoming like more of a business than an institution of learning, I don't see how that's not playing into the devaluation of the American, I don't know, the American ability to think. Um,
Well, I mean, the government, the Trump and the drive for profit, commodification of education to make it for profit and profit driven, has an ideological history in the United States, and privatization is part of that, of public services, public education. What do you think that the Vance's view and these people who support Vance uh, have of education? Because they've said that the professors or the faculty or the enemy, that we have to transform the universities and or maybe destroy higher education. What does that fit into the attack that you're under? Because it's not only Harvard, UC is threatened as well. Many public institutions around the country are facing a confrontation, a maybe an existential crisis as far as their future.
yeah, I mean, I think it's repulsive. Like, who takes away the funding for public broadcasting service? Um, Trump and Vance. And yeah, it would be disheartening if I wasn't doing union organizing, um, because it does feel relentless, and it does feel like some shift has happened like since I've been in college. So within the last 10 years, there's been an even more aggressive turn to trying to, steal the money from these institutions that already have too much money, to be completely sure. Like, already have too much money, but to completely bottom them out and make them impotent in our culture. Um, which I think we're seeing the final signs of that through these science funding cuts, where they're literally like, I'm pretty sure half of Doge was just control F, reproduction, and then like deleting funding. We had people whose cancer research funding was not necessarily just at Harvard, but like, these are stories that I've heard around New England, where because their cancer funding has to do with like the reproduction of cells, which is what cancer is, right? It's the overproduction of malignant cells. Their funding got cut because they assumed it was about like women's reproductive rights, or gender, or something like that. And the only way they're able to get this far and their blatant anti-intellectualism, to the point of calling faculty of, universities evil and the enemy, is by undercutting things like social science and humanities and fine arts, because we need all of those things as like academic institutions to understand when and where we have to guard ourselves and call truth to power. Um, yeah, yeah. And also, like, I don't know, I feel like Vance, especially, and again, this is me, Sara, person, not necessarily me, Sara, union president, talking, but like, as someone who went to many of the same institutions as JD Vance, and like is also from a family that, like I said, didn't have access to schooling and resources. I'm from rural North Carolina. It's just like disgusting to see someone, such a group of people, take advantage of this so-called American dream and then turn around and not only like traitor out their families, but also do the ultimate ladder pulling underneath them, um, for money and fascism. Yeah.
And the government has said the people who are attacking Harvard, they're attacking Columbia, that the problem is the Palestinian protests, the violent Palestinian protests, and these protests are anti-Semitic. Where does your union stand on that? Because it seems like it's not obviously just about Harvard, but an attack on the activism around the genocide and the situation in Palestine.
Yeah, our union has more than a handful of times had a union-wide vote, and voiced our support for Palestinians and those who are being attacked, um, by the Israeli government through the means of the American government. And that is a right that people have. It's a right to protest, it's a right to freedom of speech. And I think if the last 19, 20 months have shown us anything, it's that um, often the people who protest genocide, who protest war, who protest conflict are on the right side of history. Of course, it's not just because we're Harvard. There is obviously that aspect to it. But like, as far as our rank and file led union that democratically elects to do things, we stand in solidarity with Palestinians. We will not back down from that. And the assumption that that in itself is inherently anti Semitic is, I think, telling on yourself, right? Like, there is nothing about calling to a stop to genocide that is attacking another party. And to argue that it is in any condition is genocidal rhetoric in itself, right? Like, the idea that Colombia, for instance, and its immediate capitulation and giving up of key organizers who were not, like active during the encampments, as if they received their money back, as if they won't be pulled by a string by the administration for the rest of the administration's existence. It's clearly not about anti-Semitism, because if it was, then Trump wouldn't be threatening to displace so many international students, many of whom are Jewish. That is not a way to make your dreams come true when it comes to creating international solidarity on college campuses or otherwise. I'm a Black American, so I am not, I don't find myself in a very real position to speak on behalf of anyone, let alone my union, let alone the Jewish folks in my union. But when you democratically elect to do something, that is reality. And there are many, 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 many people in our union who are Jewish and who continue to speak truth to power, as is true with all of these calls to the end of violence in Gaza. And we have Palestinian folks in our unions as well, in our units. These are real people. And the idea that anyone should be sold out by their colleagues in an effort to get a promise of federal funding back is unacceptable. And it clearly, it just shows how much this is not about anti-Semitism, and how much this is just petty grievance from a very powerful government who wants to be dictators.
And the attacks by ICE They're going to schools, they're going to courts. The proposed budget of the Trump is for another $150 billion for militarization of ICE on the border. Much of that money could be used against Americans who are critical of the government or trade unions or others. How has the attack on immigrants affected your university, your membership?
People are definitely scared. Um, but it's also meant that people have realized that the most surefire way to get through this is by supporting the folks in their community. Um, I won't speak to like the types of organizing that have been happening just for security's sake, but I think the reaction that we saw across our membership and our unit, whether it be ICE presence in the Boston area, whether it be folks like Ksenia, who is in the Harvard Academic Workers Union, like she's covered by them, just kind of disappearing, being gone for months, and people finding out about it egregiously late, and that is Harvard's fault because Harvard knew about it, and it was only through organizing and word of mouth that her colleagues found out where she was. Ksenia is the researcher, the cancer researcher who had been detained for a long time uh, in Louisiana and had recently had her hearing in Vermont. Um, yeah, it's been something that has shaken us. It's also part of a very long succession of attacks that we've been facing for a while. And so it's overwhelming, but it also gives people a reason to feel like they can push back, like they can be politically engaged, even in quiet ways to protect themselves and their community.
And you're part of the UAW. In fact, the graduate students are an important part of the UAW,
Yes.
80,000. Do you think that, first of all, what has the union done nationally around organizing all UAW members against these attacks? And you think that what is the labor movement as a whole and unions to do? The AFL-CIO, all unions, there are other unions, my union, I'm in the CWA, the News Guild. We
Yes.
organize in educational institutions as well. What has your union done, the UAW, but what do you think the unions nationally have done or should do in defending education workers such as yourselves who are under attack?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that UAW has been doing, which has been outstandingly helpful, especially for us graduate students who, again, have to write dissertations and do our own research on top of the teaching and researching that we are unionized for. And brain work is just as I'm sure you know, is just as exhausting, though it's a different type of exhaustion as physical labor. They have really supported us by creating lawsuits against the Trump administration that have proven, knock on wood, to be successful in uh, basically calling the Trump administration's bluff, I guess you could say. None of them have been fully resolved, but we can kind of see how a new lawsuit or a new injunction or something like that gets dropped, and suddenly the Trump administration feels the need to change tactics. Um, they've also voiced support uh, of us at pivotal times. But I think that one of the things that we can do on a national level that my union and the unions at Harvard have begun to do is band together regardless of what our work looks like and who our parent unions are, to kind of show that there is not a difference between certainly there are differences in jobs, there are differences in pay. I make less than a good chunk of the rest of my union because I'm in the humanities and not in science. But that doesn't mean that we're not working class, right? And I think the solidarity of everyone to acknowledge, like, no, I don't have this job in the factory, but I see that as my brother. I see that person. I see those people in the factory as my comrades is so important and is a quiet thing that's happening, but I think it has to be a lot stronger. I think we have to have more visible unity across all of our unionized efforts in America. And we have to kind of demystify the way in which all of us are workers. Like, and this kind of goes back to some of the stereotypes about what graduate student labor is and how that's not correct, right? Like, if I left the university or if I was expelled or like whatever have you, I wouldn't have any money to fall back on. And I think that's a very similar thing for almost all workers in America. And I think that is the thing that we have to be mindful of for each other is that we're all living under the foot, under the boot of capitalism. And none of us are going to be able to make direct change in the way that elites are able to just sort of buy elections, able to just throw money somewhere, able to click a button and suddenly, you know, the whole group of people who run the nuclear bombs are fired. But we do have that power if we all stand together and if we all call on our local politicians. And I say that kind of begrudgingly only because I think we're reaching a point where we don't just have to call in our local politicians, we have to hold them to account for the things that are happening, right? Like one of the issues that many people see in Massachusetts, for it to be such a liberal state, a lot of really important resolutions and laws that people hope to pass go into the state legislature and disappear and are, if they are ever heard from again, it's kind of like a few years down the road, but more than often it's like no one really knows what happened to that hopeful piece of law. um, and I think we have to band together and hold both politicians to account and this government. And I think that that does look like strikes. I think that that does look like uh, work stoppages. I think that looks like all kinds of stuff that we haven't really embarked on yet.
Well, that may happen this coming fall.
God willing.
Now, one of the other things that's happening with this kind of rise of fascism and fascist attacks is the threat against musicians, Bruce Springsteen, Swift. This uh, the rise of fascism and threats, physical threats, personal threats
Mhm.
to shut down musicians. You think it's going to create a backlash because musicians have played a role in challenging systems, challenging racism and challenging war.
Um, Backlash, what do you mean? From which end?
From the musicians, from the
Oh, I hope so. I mean, speaking as someone who is slash was a musician, which is how I ended up doing graduate school and music studies, most of us usually are looking at a fork in the road and decide we'd rather read books than, you know, be professional musicians. And I'm one of them. I certainly hope it does. I mean, music is a commodity, always has been. You know, it's one of Marx's favorite commodities to talk about because it's invisible. Um, and also, the arts have this reputation of pushing back against injustice fascism, as you said, all of these things. I'm really hopeful it'll come from the more popular musicians, but I'm not convinced. But I do think that there will be cultural backlash, and I think we're already seeing it, right? Like, I mean, not to beat the internet's favorite dead horse, but Luigi Mangione allegedly, um, that kind of action having being such a sticking point to the majority of people. He's certainly not a musician, but I do think that this sort of anti-elitism, when pointed at CEOs, at billionaires, yada yada yada. I mean, it's a popular thing, and nobody can argue that it's unpopular. Um, and I think that's part of why I'm a little bit skeptical about huge named musicians because they, inherently are part of that population. But I think the people of America want to feel like they are speaking up for the right thing and that they're in solidarity with people like them. And I think one of the ways that best communicates that is through music and through art. So I definitely think some sort of backlash is, already here to some degree, but definitely forthcoming.
And the working class, the issue of like healthcare that you're referring to, the
Mm-hmm.
fact that we don't have a national healthcare system, that you and your members, if you lose your jobs, lose your healthcare. It seems like this political problem, social, economic problem, political problem, that we don't have a working class party, we don't have a working class movement to say everyone should have health care as a human right. These seem to mean that there's a political vacuum. You were saying that bills disappear in the legislature in Massachusetts, the same in California
Uh-huh.
with single payer, for example. People want to have a single payer in California. They can't get it with the Democrats, with Newsom, the politicians. You think this is going to lead to a political development where people say we really need a working class political alternative in this country?
I really, really, really hope so. Um, like I said, I always feel like I need to qualify it because at the end of the day, I'm a fucking nerd. But while being first gen low income, I did a master's at Oxford, a 2-year master's. And when I was in the UK, the way that I could just walk into a GP, a general practitioner's office, and say, this hurts, and then they would give me like medicine for free was crazy. And I think that's gotta happen. And I mean, our neighbors to the north, I mean, their single payer or like universal social health care is already under threat. It always is under threat. It's under threat in the UK. And it's from these ideas of like, well, when you have global healthcare, you have to wait forever in order to be seen. But like, how many people never go to the doctor because we don't have healthcare, or even the healthcare that we do receive is so bare bones that anything more than a yearly physical results in thousands of dollars. I think once people start really realizing how often we're lied to and how frequently this claim of individuality being the best option, of capitalism and temporarily embarrassed millionaires being the entirety of America, will start to recognize that we do need a people's a people's party, and it doesn't exist right now. It's going to be really hard. I'm positive of that because there will always be a portion of our population that will fight tooth and nail against their best interests, but it's not impossible. And having experienced such a thing, I believe that that's horrendous. Sorry, somebody just walked past. Said the N word. I hope you can cut that out. But sorry. But having seen it and having experienced it, I know for a fact that it is possible to create such social systems in this country. It had existed. They were diluted, they were destroyed, but we can get them back. It'll take a lot. And I think we have to, as a working class, as American public, have to build that muscle of pushing for what is best for the common good.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much, Sara. And I think your struggle is not just about your own union, the graduate students, but all working people, as we're discussing, because you're affected by healthcare. You're affected by everything that's going on in this country, and you're under attack. So I want to thank you for joining us. We've been talking with Sara Speller. She is a Harvard Graduate Student Union, UAW 5118 president, and her union and other unions at Harvard are under direct attack, as well as the university, by the Trump government and facing attack on their members and their international students. And a large part of American higher education is under similar attack. So I think this is important for all working people in the United States. So
Yeah, thank you so much. All power to the people.